The roots of the mob warfare and bloodshed of the 1980s can be directly tied to Atlantic City and the passing of the Casino Gambling Act. Running the Philadelphia La Cosa Nostra family at the time was longtime Philadelphia mob boss Angelo Bruno. Known as the Gentle Don, Bruno knew he was no match for the New York families who had their eyes on Atlantic City, so he declared that this traditional Philadelphia territory was now open to any LCN family, a move that would eventually contribute to his murder.
He was very astute in recognizing he might as well give them permission, these other families, to come in rather than risk the incurred wrath and the resulting gang warfare, or merely these other mobs muscling in. So he declared Atlantic City an open city. That certainly created a backlash within the members of his own mob, which contributed to his eventual assassination.
Filling the shoes of Bruno would be his underboss, Phil "Chicken Man" Testa. Testa's reign, however, would come to an almost immediate halt less than a year later when he was killed by a bomb that was planted on the porch of his South Philadelphia home, planted on the orders of his very own underboss, Petey Casella, who had reportedly thought with the boss out of the way, he would rise as Testa had to the top.
And that was Petey Casella's hope that once he was free from Testa as the boss and being the underboss at that time, that he would naturally rise to the top. Of course, that never happened. There was quite a backlash against Casella.
A backlash that would eventually force Casella underground, creating a void in the mob's leadership. A void looking to be filled by Testa consigliere Nicky Scarfo. Scarfo set out immediately for New York to seek the necessary approval of the ruling commission there. But exactly what was it that this capo, banished to Atlantic City, had to offer that made him so confident of their approval?
The main factor was that Scarfo's organization was already in place here. He ruled the resort's rackets from these two apartment houses at 26 and 28 North Georgia Avenue, Scarfo's home. But to understand how Scarfo became mob boss, we must go back to a time when he had just been released from jail for killing a longshoreman. Angry at the young mobster's temperamental carelessness, mob boss Angelo Bruno banished him to a new ball and chain, Atlantic City. The year was 1963. The world's playground was in a state of decline. Yet Scarfo managed to thrive at the seashore in bookmaking, loan sharking, and illegal gambling. When gambling was legalized here in 1976, Scarfo was ready. He controlled the iron and concrete workers' unions and even formed his own concrete company, Scarf Inc. 5 casinos employed Scarf Inc. and also knowingly employed a large roster of non-existent employees, but in return had no union labor problems.
The mob will get involved in a union to be in a position to be able to exercise that choking point and force the casino into doing whatever it is that they want them to do.
Scarfo also controlled Local 54, the hotel and restaurant employees union, the most powerful in Atlantic City. Its president, Frank Gerace, associated with Scarfo. Gerace's mother even lived in Scarfo's apartment house. Casino management recognized Local 54's Mafia ties.
Business agent did not have to walk in and say, I'm the mob. He just had to walk in and say, I'm Local 54. They knew who he was, and I have a company I want you to do business with, and the message is delivered, and if there was a way that it could be done, it was done.
Little Nicky also proved his power in 1980, when he, Phil Leonetti, and Lawrence Merlino were charged with the murder of associate Vincent Falcone. Mobster wannabe Joe Salerno, a brigantine plumber, witnessed the killing. Fearing for his own life, he turned informant.
We tried the case, but we were not able to convince the jury beyond a reasonable doubt as to the guilt of the defendants based on the uncorroborated testimony of Joe Salerno. Not everything in the war ends in success. We have losses, and that was one of them.
Salerno's testimony would eventually contribute to the toppling of Scarfo. But for now, Nicodemo Scarfo appeared untouchable and would soon become the uncontested boss of Atlantic City.
Three reputed Atlantic City mobsters were acquitted today on charges of murdering a cement contractor for making slighting comments about 2 of them. There has been official speculation that the murder last December of contractor Vincent Falcone, age 30, was part of a continuing struggle by various organized crime members for control of the streets of Atlantic City. After deliberating 5 hours, the jury acquitted Nicodemo Scarfo, 52, described by authorities as the current Mafia rackets boss in Atlantic City. His 27-year-old nephew, Philip Leonetti, who has been investigated in connection with other Atlantic City murders, and their associate, Lawrence Merlino, 34. Mr. Falcone was shot to death last December 16th in a suburban bungalow. The body, bound and wrapped in a blanket, was found stuffed in the trunk of Mr. Falcone's automobile on December 21st. He told me one time he'd like to take a guy and cut his guts out, fry them in a fucking frying pan. I felt the knife in my dreams many times. That's shit you just don't forget. I think if Nicky ever got a chance to get a hold of me himself, he'd make me die a slow fucking death. He'd probably cut my fingers off, or cut my privates off, or something. How well did you know Vincent Falcone? I was a plumber. He was a cement contractor. We worked with our hands. We'd hang out together. Me, him, and Alfredo. Go drinking. He was my buddy. December 16th, 1979, the night Vincent Falcone is murdered. Where were you? I was at a house in Margate, New Jersey. Whose house? It was a friend of theirs, Phil Disney. I think his name was McFillin. Was this McFillin present at the time of the murder? No, he wasn't there. How did you end up at this house in Margate? Lawrence Merlino, Chucky's brother. He called me one day. I was at home at the apartment on Georgia Avenue. He calls me up. He says to me, he wants you to come over. He? Scarfo. When he says he means Nicky. They were going to have a little pre-Christmas party. He said Falcone and him and some of the guys were heading out there to watch the game. What game? I think it was the Dallas Cowboys against... I don't remember. Anyway, I went down to the office, and we got into Lawrence's Thunderbird and headed out there. It was a short ride, no more than 10 minutes. Who was in the car? Phil Leonetti, Lawrence, Vince, me. That must have been some drive. It seemed like the most mundane thing at the time. A couple of guys heading out to watch a football game. Your buddies were on their way to kill a guy. Like I told you, I had no idea what was going down with these guys. What was the mood in the Thunderbird? Everything seemed normal. In fact, Philip and Vince were chatting away, talking about old times. Vince is the one who taught Philip most of what he knows about cement contracting. For a while, he was sort of like a mentor to him. Now you're in Margate. When we got there, it was dark, you know? It was December, and the house was on the beach. I didn't notice it at the time, but when I look back, it was an eerie fucking night. In what way? The wind, the ocean, just that whole fucking vibe. For a place overrun with visitors come summer, that stretch of beach was deserted. Miles of empty summer homes, and no sign of life. Sounds like the perfect spot to commit a murder and dump a body. When we walk into the apartment, Nick is already there. He was on the couch. The TV was on. He had a newspaper in his hand with reading glasses on. I think he was watching the pre-game. And still no sign of a murder in the making. These guys, they're real cool when it comes to running a con. They are hitmen to the fucking core. They don't break character. They're in their zone from the minute you're in their line of fire to the minute they pull the trigger. Vince, he never saw it coming. When we get there, things feel a little tense. We all thought more guys would have been there. So, you sensed something was off. Scarfo, or maybe Philip, said something about the other guys running late, that they had stopped to pick up takeout. You could have kind of tell, though. Oh, yeah? What's that? Vince. He seemed a little anxious. All that shit he said about Nick. Him and Philip doing shitty work on those construction jobs in AC. Now being in the same room with the two of them. I think it made him uneasy. And yet, you both accepted their invitation. They promised him some big promotion in the concrete union. And it was the holidays. Who the fuck is thinking about getting whacked 9 days before Christmas? And like I said, these guys, they make it real fucking easy to drink the Kool-Aid. There's more than one fucking way to rock a guy to sleep. You and Vince, Lawrence and Philip are there. With Scarfo. Nick asked Vince if he liked Chinese food, or Thai, I think. Vince got all fucking excited. This guy, always had food on the fucking brain. Then Nick said he wanted a drink, and Philip, he suggested they head into the kitchen. Him and Vince. What are you doing while all this is going on? I'm in the dining room, which is off the kitchen, talking to Lawrence. The place was pretty small. What are you talking to Lawrence about? Bally's Park Place was about to have its grand opening. At the time, I was trying to get in on the next gig, you know? Do some plumbing work on Bally's and the Playboy Hotel, which was scheduled for completion just a few months later in the spring of '81. These guys, they were getting all these big contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts. With that 10 grand hanging over my head, I could use the work. And while you're trying to close the deal, Nick calls out for Vince to bring him some cutty sock and water. Where was Nick Scarfo? In the living room. He's still on the couch. Where was Philip Leonetti? He was in the kitchen with Vince. I don't know if that was the code word, him calling out for Vince to get him the cutty socks, but once he did that, Philip tells Vince to get some ice. You think it was a signal? That's what I thought. I mean, it wasn't more than a few seconds that Vince heads for the fridge. I'm still talking to Lawrence when Philip comes and stands next to me. Matter of fact, he was about a half step behind me, off to the side. I don't think we were in the house 10 minutes. All of a sudden, Philip steps in front of me, arm extended. He's holding a gun to Vince's head. Your gun. He presses it up against the back of this guy's head and pulls off a shot. When Vince first got shot, he turned, his body twisted around to see probably who hurt him. But when he turned around, he was staring, and the expression on his face was one of helplessness. As Vince is going down to the floor, Philip looks dead at me. He tells me, now he's still got the gun in his fucking hand by his side. He tells me, Joe, this guy, he was a no-good motherfucker. Then Nick gets up off the couch. He comes over to me, puts his hand on my arm, and he says to me, you're one of us now, Joe. He goes over to the body. He goes over to Vince. The guy is there, staring out into space. Nick bends over him, listens to his chest. He wants to see if his heart is still beating. He asks Philip for the gun. He says he thinks they should give him another one.
Tomorrow night, we'll examine what law officials think led to the demise of the Scarfo crime family and who they believe is now controlling the Philadelphia Atlantic City mob.
Meanwhile, South Jersey mob boss Little Nicky Scarfo is currently serving a 55-year sentence in federal prison for a 1988 racketeering conviction.
Last week, Scarfo won a new trial in the murder of Frankie Flowers D'Alfonso, a trial that made Scarfo the first Don in the history of organized crime to be convicted of first-degree murder. But no matter what the outcome of the new trial, Scarfo is in prison on federal charges for life. Tonight, as John and I conclude our series, Disorganized Crime, we examine Scarfo's failed leadership style and explore who is controlling the South Jersey mob now.
He was certainly a killer without conscience, a killer without remorse.
Nicodemo Scarfo was the bloodiest mob boss since Al Capone, killing for reasons beyond the Mafia's traditional code of business. He murdered to intimidate and to calm his own paranoia over threats to his throne, such as his own capo, Salvatore Testa. During his reign, Scarfo ordered 24 mob hits. Authorities believe it was Little Nicky's bloodthirsty style that led to his downfall. When he turned on his own family members, they turned to the law.
Once his violence and his willingness to inflict punishment on his own members became well known, that certainly provided great encouragement for other members of his family when they were confronted by law enforcement of their own potential demise to be much more willing to give up their allegiance to Scarfo and to think of themselves.
Those familiar with organized crime believe Scarfo's violent leadership watered down the gene pool of the Philadelphia Atlantic City mob, leaving those capable of running the organization either dead or in the witness protection program.
The organization runs according to the skill and expertise of its members. The guy at the top very seldom gets involved in the mechanic work. And when you start to systematically eliminate the mechanics, then the whole organization begins to fall. It begins to crumble.
Scarfo brought his own downfall as a result of his management style. He was too greedy, he was too vicious.